The bases drop finally on Soccer Down here on a Friday. It kind of half dropped and then didn't fully drop, and didn't know why it didn't drop all the way. And then it's like, all right, are we going to have to get a hamster running to power the internet going kind of thing? And luckily we do not.
No, but I do give Chiefs coach Steve credit for the SpongeBob SquarePants gif about rebooting. That was pretty much where we were a little before 9 o'clock.
Yes, that happened, and it's like, all right, now what? Okay, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, all right, well, all right, we'll be okay. Thought we were going to have to run it off a hotspot, and that's not the best way to do the show. No. It can be done, but that was plan C, I think. Didn't get there, though.
It was that far up the list?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's only so many plans. I mean, the ideas of sticking a giant antenna out the window and thinking that would provide internet, those days are
especially
gone.
During a rainstorm.
Yes, and it was nearly biblical at about 9 o'clock.
Yes, it was. I will grant you that. So
it was the first time that I can remember getting Gwen in the harness and getting her ready to go out in the morning, and we go out the back door, which goes down some steps, and you could just hear it pouring. And she's like, nope, not even going down the steps. So then it's like, all right, we'll go out the front door where you're not going down a bunch of steps, and maybe there's a little more tree cover, and she might be okay. We open the door to go outside, and it's pouring, and she's like, nope, pulls back the other way.
Yep.
So yes. Gwen is holding it as we speak.
Yeah. So if Gwen is slightly more excitable between the two live hours, then you'll know why. And if there has to be the musical interlude at some point,
John
then
might
you'll
have
know
to
what's
carry
going
a
on.
segment while I'm walking.
When I carry a segment, you'll know what's going on. Gwen had to go 10-100.
If I disappear or you hear Gwen growling at me and barking at me, not barking outside, not barking off in the distance, but right in front of the microphone, barking at me, that's why she refused to go out earlier.
Damn it. Let's go.
She wanted no part of it earlier.
I can't blame her.
I wasn't looking forward to it.
But Patty and Trooper just made it before the biblical rains happened, and I was trying to figure out. The Amazon guy actually did bring by 40 cubits of wood. That was the timing in all of this.
Okay.
But so sure enough, we get a delivery from them this morning, and I thought it was one thing, but no, it was 40 cubits of wood to build an ark. So we're in good shape.
Nice, good times. All right, Good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna hire someone else to do it. I'm gonna bring in the Opera Dan, our handyman, to build the ark. You don't want me touching that stuff.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's get into some soccer down here, shall we?
Surely.
All right, we will be getting into the Friday flashback, mostly in hour number 2. Put out a poll on the Twitter yesterday, 80 votes in it. And it was, I wasn't sure where it would go. Honestly, as I was putting the poll together, I just thought of 4 different flashback topics that first came to mind, and they were kind of all over the place. And I wasn't sure where it would go, but rule changes was what won. Beat out crazy MLS playoff formats, which we're going to have to get to here at some point because I forgot about one, and I'm working on our MLS greatest team bracket tournament that we're going to unleash upon you next week. Right. And one team that got knocked out of the playoffs in just one of the craziest formats that I'd completely forgotten about. We'll get into that at another time. Best NASL brands. We'll have to get into that at some point too. But
see, I was lobbying for that one. I don't know if I can necessarily vote.
Yeah,
but
no, you can.
But
vote.
I was okay because I didn't want to skew it and and come in on multiple Twitter accounts. But yeah, no, I had 3 of my best NASL brands that I was ready to unleash on people.
We'll save it and we'll get into that at another time. But rule changes is the topic, and prepping for it, I was kind of blown away at the lack of rule changes in modern times in the sport of soccer. I mean, I knew there wasn't many, but you wonder why people are freaking out about every little rule change.
Yeah.
Well, this is why. There's just not that many. The early days had some interesting ones, but once you got into modern times, really with the World Cup starting, it's been pretty consistent. So we'll get into that in hour number 2. If you have rule changes, if you have flashback-related questions about rule changes, and you can even take it because it's kind of a prelude for us to continue that discussion about what soccer looks like in a post-VAR world, in a post-replay world. And you have to often look back to have an understanding of why things are the way they are and where they can go. So we'll do the looking back, and then we'll start to look ahead at maybe some of the future rule changes that we could see, whether they're VAR related or not, because there's some that I think have nothing to do with VAR, but are desperately needed in the game. We'll get to that too this morning. All right. News. We mentioned that it was a rumor yesterday. It was made official yesterday afternoon. Rafael Dudamel has officially stepped down as Venezuela's national team manager. The immediate speculation was about Diego Maradona taking over.
Yes.
Okay. Get ready for the craziness if that happens.
Oh, let there be an Amazon series if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, they did the one on Dorados when he was in Mexico. That was a Netflix one because I haven't seen it yet. It would be nuts. He's better as a manager than he was with Argentina 10 years ago. It's honestly not even close. He's done pretty well with Gimnasia, to be honest. We'll see if they stay up. They've got 18 matches to try to change their fortunes, and they're in a decent spot if they keep playing at the rate that they have and others around them struggle. But would he leave that and go to a national team gig with Venezuela? Anything's possible when it comes to Maradona. Like I won't make it a guess on it because I could see it happen and I could see it not happen and I could see it happen for 5 days and then him leave and who knows. That's just where it is. There was some speculation as well, and this one would be very interesting to see if anything comes of it. Giovanni Savarese. You're talking about a former national team forward, and you're talking about a very successful Venezuelan manager. Would he be interested in leaving Portland to take it? I don't think he would. Yeah. I think there's a bit of unfinished business for him in Portland. Getting to a final in his first year there, struggling last year, not living up to the expectations that they set, and now looking like this year is going to be a big one for them. And with the signings that they have made and the signings that they are rumored to be making, this feels like a big year for the Timbers. I don't think Savarese would leave it.
I think that if you did not have this kind of activity and there was some level of frustration that we have not seen, if there were some negatives that could lend itself to that notion, I could see Gio jumping to a national team gig, but the investment that he has been given, part and parcel, without hesitation, for me, he's been given the tools and there's not been any reason for him to be told no. So I would say as long as he's continued to have resources put in front of him, he's going to try to do the best that he can to get things to where he wants in Portland.
Yeah, and I think he's got the resources. And a big part of that is Jimmy Chara, who has come in as a new Timber signing. And we do have the official pronunciation, and the Portland Timbers have put this out as well. They are going by Jimmy. So the Y is a J sound, and it is Jimmy Chara, a player that Portland has wanted to bring in for a while. Gavin Wilkinson, their president of soccer and GM, said that Jimmy is a player we have followed closely for nearly 10 years, and having the resources made available to bring him to Portland is tremendous for everyone in the club. They have two Charas now. It's Diego's brother. He is predominantly a winger, can play some up top, but predominantly a winger. 10 caps, 1 goal for the Colombian national team. Last played for the selection March 2019 in a friendly against Japan. So recently. It's a big addition. And if they go get the Polish forward that we discussed yesterday that they've been linked to, and you're essentially replacing Brian Fernandez with 2 players, with a forward who is among the leading goal scorers in Poland this season, and Jimmy Chara, a Colombian national team player, you're lifting what was a good team already to another level.
Where would you put them if the Legia Warsaw transaction goes down? Where would you put them in the West with what they've been able to do in the offseason?
Well, I had them really even late last year among the favorites and among MLS Cup contenders. And they ultimately couldn't perform at that level. And part of it is Brian Fernandez and his personal issues that took him out of the postseason. I think part of it was just fatigue. Honestly, they had that crazy schedule with all the road games early, then all the home games at the end. I think it took a toll on them. I think talent-wise, last year, they were among the best in the Western Conference. This year, you add Jimmy Chara, you add the forward, or Jeremy Abobasi becomes more of a true number 9. You have Valeri back, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down just yet. Same with Sebastian Blanco. The biggest question for me that's left on the table for them is who's going to be the right partner with Diego Chara in that holding midfield. Is it going to be Eric Williamson continuing to step up? Is it Renzo Zambrano? Is it Andres Flores? Both of them have had opportunities in this but haven't really made that spot their own. That's really the only weak spot. Because I think you have a good center back pairing with Mabiala and Cascante. And now you've added Zuparic as well. Dario Zuparic this offseason makes you better. Bill Tuiloma, another good center back to have in your rotation. That's 4. Outside backs, you've got Jorge Villafana, you've got Jorge Morera, and you've got Marco Farfan as a reserve. You might need a little more depth there on the right side. But you're getting down to less important details. Their starting 11 will be among the best in the Western Conference. I think they're a contender to be an MLS Cup.
In the West, it's some combination of LA Seattle Sporting Portland or LA Seattle Portland Sporting for the top 4.
I think right now, on January 3rd, you're looking at LAFC, you're looking at Portland, you're looking at Sporting Kansas City, you're looking at Real Salt Lake, LA Galaxy potentially, but they've still got work to do. Seattle's actually got a good bit of work to do, and I'm not putting them in that group as they're currently constructed. I think if they do what we expect them to do in this window, they'll be there, but right now they're not. Then who's going to be the next one? Minnesota, questions. Who's going to score the goals?
Yep.
Because that's been an issue for them. Is Vancouver going to step up? Now that they've spent some money and they have Lucas Cavallini in the mix, you've got year 2 of Marc Dos Santos. Are they going to take that step up? San Jose, are they going to take that step up with Matias Almeida? You would expect that they would. I think the Western Conference is going to be incredibly competitive, but I would put LAFC, Portland, and Sporting just a step ahead of the rest right now.
That's why I wanted to gauge with this transaction with Portland where it would put them in the mix, and knowing that they were a top 4, didn't know where you had them in the top 4.
I've got them in the top 3 right now, but and as I keep saying, it's January 3rd. Camps haven't opened yet, and this takes us back to Atlanta United. Rachel Affleck just asked the question. And I am really getting concerned. Basically, nothing on new signings. All other teams seem active. If they went into the season with just one addition, we will be falling behind. I don't expect that to be the case. I don't expect only one addition with the subtractions that they've had, and with the subtraction, and I know everybody's seen the pictures of Leandro Gonzalez Perez once that becomes official, and I'm assuming you haven't seen those posted publicly, and they haven't been, officially put out by Tijuana yet because it's, the paperwork's not signed. It hasn't been announced publicly. When that happens, you're going to see a reaction to it, I think, from Atlanta United. You're going to see moves made. I do really think that the CBA is causing havoc, not just for Atlanta. There's other teams in the situation too, and we just talked about Seattle as one. I mean, Seattle at this point is going into the season with 3 defenders, period. They've got a ton of work to do. Now they're linked to a couple players, and they were linked to a couple players that now look to be going elsewhere. Links and rumors really don't mean that much. It's about the signings. If you don't get the signings in before you get to CONCACAF time, then yes, we're having a different conversation. But not having rumors, honestly, I don't really care. Rumors are rumors. They don't necessarily mean anything. I don't think you can judge a team's actions on rumors that are out there about them.
Also on the board this morning from Jeremy York and our friends at Impact. LGP stuff aside, are the 2 areas of possible need for Atlanta United depth behind Joseph Martinez and Brad Gazan, how likely that they look in MLS to fill these from a team like Portland or other that's looking to jump back up into cup contention with a solid move or 2. Be safe, guys.
Well, there's no need to do anything behind Brad Gazan because you re-signed Alec Can, and you have Brendan Moore. So you've got 3 goalkeepers, the same 3 you had last year. You're good. As things are currently constructed, you have Tito Villalba as the reserve behind Joseph Martinez. If that changes, you're definitely going to need somebody. I think you need somebody anyway. I think you need somebody who's going to provide something a little different in that role. We've talked about the potential need for a bigger target forward type of reserve. Somebody who you could actually pair up with Joseph if you chose to. Options around the league for that, there's not a ton, to be honest. And I wonder if you might be looking outside. There's a couple teams that have a number of players up top that they might not be able to keep, or you might have players who are looking for more playing time elsewhere. I look at Colorado with Nicky Jackson and Diego Rubio behind Kai Kamara. I don't see Robin Fraser playing 2 up top. So do they think maybe we can move one of those? Either one would be a great reserve to have in this situation. Dallas has some, but they have a lot of young guys. I don't think they're going to move on from them. Houston has some, but I think they're waiting to see what happens with Mauro Manotas because there are rumors of him going to a French club. Reportedly, $7 million is the magic number, which I think is a reasonable request for him. Behind him, you're talking about Christian Ramirez. You're talking about Ronaldo Pena. Pena could be one to keep an eye on, a Venezuelan forward that might be a good reserve / partner from time to time for Joseph Martinez. There's a few teams that have a little bit of depth here, some guys that could be intriguing to Atlanta, but I think there's also the potential to go outside the league and get somebody else.
Chris Ashley this morning, he says he wanted to know if we could use the hashtag Flashback Friday to go back to yesterday before he saw the pics of LGP and Cholos gear, and then in all caps, I would try to do this in my Nancy Kerrigan voice, but why with a crying emoji or an anguished emoji?
It happens.
There are no tears.
I mean, it's just part of the gig. It's going to happen. These things do occur. And with Cholos starting their Clausura season next weekend, they've got to get guys in and they've got to make these moves, and they might be needing to spend aggressively. And if the offer is good enough, you have to consider it to better the team. That's just part of the business.
And it's, when you are a global team with a global brand, you know that players of yours are going to be in demand, and you're also going to have to look to better yourself. And you cannot be a DC United, you cannot be a Tottenham Hotspur and wait until the player has the benefit in his half. It's being proactive and not reactive, and that's part of the deal when folks want to come knocking on your door. Bottom line.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, and Rory Smith wrote about this in his newsletter today. Rory Smith writes about soccer for the New York Times. It's a great newsletter to subscribe to. I definitely recommend it. But he talked about this in the sense of Erling Haaland, who, if you'll remember, moving from Red Bull Salzburg to Borussia Dortmund, 19-year-old Norwegian striker. And you're going from a club in Red Bull Salzburg that has the Europa League coming up, that was really close to actually getting through in the Champions League and knocking out either Liverpool or Napoli, a team that I think turned a lot of heads. But they're also a team that has to sell. But part of that is by selling, you're going to attract more talent coming in. And Haaland is a prime example of that. You want the honest truth, Borussia Dortmund is that kind of club too. And Borussia Dortmund's a big club. But how often do you see Borussia Dortmund develop players, sell them on, and make a profit and reinvest it? Now, they just did with Christian Pulisic, and they're going to do it with Jadon Sancho, and they're going to do it with Haaland. It's going to continue to happen. It's part of the gig. There's very few clubs in the world that don't have to sell players when the time comes. And honestly, if they don't manage it right, then they become a Manchester United. And we've seen this. That was a club that in the past maybe didn't have to sell players because they were one of the biggest clubs in the world. And they could just bump up salaries, and they had every opportunity for players to play at the highest level that you could imagine, and you were good. But if you don't do it effectively, then you turn into what they've turned into. Maybe it's Real Madrid, it's Barcelona, it's Bayern, it's Manchester City. You could put Liverpool in that mix now, I think. That if you're at that club and you're a top player, you're not looking to go anywhere else. You're good. And you're going to be paid handsomely, and there's not another step up on the ladder. If you're anybody else, if you're any other club, you're going to have to make it clear to players when you bring them in that you'll sell. You'll sell when the time comes for that player to make more money, to get a bigger salary, to get a longer-term contract, whatever it is, a higher level of play, a club with bigger ambitions, whatever. Pretty much every club but about 5 or 6 have to sell when the time comes. And that's just part of the business. I thought it was a great look at it from the Red Bull Salzburg, Borussia Dortmund, and then looking at the biggest clubs in the world perspective from Rory Smith this morning. Definitely go subscribe to his newsletter over at New York Times. It's a good one for not just European soccer, but all aspects of it and stuff that'll make you think a little bit. That kind of stuck with me as we're talking about LGP and we're talking about Atlanta United, because how has Atlanta United made its mark on MLS and on soccer in the United States? By showing that they would sell, by making it clear from day one, before players were signed, that, look, we're not going to be a club that's going to go out and sign guys for their last big contract. We're not going to go out and sign guys who are just going to sell jerseys. We're going to sign guys who are assets, who can help the club in a transfer. And then they demonstrated that. I think first with Carlos Carmona.
Yeah.
They proved that at that time it was the right time for Carmona. He requested the move. They made the deal work for the club. Everybody benefited. Miguel Almiron, that was part of the pitch to get him here, was that you were going to be able to prepare him to make the jump to Europe better than Lanús could in Argentina. And you did. I don't think Lanús would have gotten that transfer to Newcastle that Atlanta did. I don't think it would have happened. I don't think he would have progressed as a player like he did here in Atlanta. I think you're going to see it with Barco. You're potentially going to see it down the road with a Miles Robinson, with a George Bello.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the gig. You have to develop players. You have to then, when the time comes, make the decision on the sell. And if that time to sell comes up, you have to be prepared for it. And that's the scouting, that's building depth, that's building networks, that's having a list of players that if this move happens, then we're going to look to this list, start with number 1, here we go. That's how this stuff works. There really are a very, very small number of clubs. You can probably count them on one hand. You might have to borrow the pinky on the other hand. That do not have to sell in these situations. That's it.
What you're seeing also with what Atlanta United has demonstrated to MLS is you're seeing other clubs now in MLS do the same thing. And it's not just one of those situations where you're talking about MLS 1.0 and 2.0, where you're bringing in players who are coming from Europe for that last big paycheck. It's not that in the case of an Atlanta United. Atlanta United developing talent, bringing in young talent, moving it on. And now you're seeing other teams in MLS understand that this, for lack of a better phrase, the European model, where you're having players as assets and moving them forward and moving them on to the next stop, is a part of the deal. And I think that that's part of the evolution of MLS. And Atlanta United has been at the forefront of that from their beginnings in the league. It's like, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to do things in this MLS 2.0 way where we're going to bring in talent who's in their mid-30s looking for that last big paycheck and doing whatever. It has been a different approach by Atlanta United. It has been a successful approach by Atlanta United. Now you're seeing other teams mirroring that to move MLS forward on the whole. It's not just something where one team is doing it and everybody else is standing pat and doing things the way that they've done in the past. What Atlanta United has done is awakened, I want to say, MLS into this way of thinking that it can work, and it can work for both the league on the whole and its reputation on the worldwide stage, and for the teams that are involved in this practice and their bottom line.
I think the first part of it has awakened the league. I think the going out and buying a different type of player, I think that has awakened the league so far. The next step is going to be the selling at the right time. So far, it's been Miguel and Alphonso Davies, which is a different situation entirely. That's it. That's the big ones. Who's going to be next? Now, we've seen, the Joe Scally announcement at New York City, academy player, homegrown player that will be leaving the club at the end of this year. Okay. These types of moves are important too. I think at times we just look at the big deals, but if Atlanta United takes a player like Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez, brings him in 2017, he was not a starter at Estudiantes. He had been a starter at Tigre, and that was the first club he had been at that he was a regular first-choice starter before coming to Atlanta. He comes to Atlanta, becomes one of the best center backs in Major League Soccer. People take notice. And then you sell him for a larger fee 3 years later at the age of 27 than you paid to bring him in. That's good business as long as you replace him effectively. And that's what you would expect the team to do because they've shown the ability to do that so far. But the idea of him being in a place after coming to Atlanta that he's drawing interest from other clubs, that's what you need to see more of, because there are a number of talented players, whether they are in South America and are looking for the lifestyle of coming to the United States, a stable league, a higher level of competition for some, whatever it is, or you're in a situation, let's look at New York City. They've taken a different spin on this, haven't they? They went out and they brought in Eber. They've brought in players from clubs that you might have looked at it on the surface and said, well, what? How is this going to work out? This is not from a big club. It's not from South America, but their scouting was very good, and they nailed it. There are players out there all over the world that can come to this league and better the league, but then also be assets. And as you see that perception of where MLS is as a league and competitively, you're going to see more moves like this one. And that's going to open up more business for MLS teams. It's going to open up more opportunities for MLS players. It's also going to open up more opportunities for players to come to MLS, because they're going to see that, one, I don't go there and just stay there. If I go there and I do well, hey, I might get another contract. I might get more money. I might stay, raise my family. Diego Valeri, prime example. But if you're a player at LGP's age, coming here when he was 24, now at 27, if he has a club that's going to offer him more money, you're going to have more clubs that are going to be willing to offer more money because MLS is respected more. That's an important element of this. LGP, being among the best defenders in MLS over the last 3 years, has raised his value. He is more valued today than he was when he left Estudiantes and came to Atlanta. That's a good thing for this league. That's a good thing for Atlanta United. You maximize that value if it's the right time and it's the right offer and the player wants to do it and the player's going to be taken care of as well, then you make the move. That's where you're at. Doug Robertson, AJC, posted an update about 15 minutes ago. You have the pictures of Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez in Xolos gear training. They were posted by a journalist, Heriberto Munoz, who reported this and took the pictures. Atlanta United declined to comment. Tijuana has not announced an acquisition of Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez yet, so he is training, and that's where things stand at the moment. We'll see if a deal gets done. I've seen the speculation. I think Matt Wagner had the question a little bit ago.
He did. Yep.
You know, is it a ploy to renegotiate with Atlanta United? You don't want to rule anything out. I don't think so here. It doesn't seem like something that Tijuana would want to be part of at this point, because they need to get a deal done. They need to get moves made, because their season starts next weekend. You know, could they get played in this? Yeah, it does happen. But you don't normally see teams step on a training pitch with somebody unless something is pretty far along. Doesn't mean it can't fall apart. Doesn't mean final terms can't get done and the deal collapses. That happens too. But I don't think it's a ploy. I just don't know if it's done yet.
And the last thing that you want in the global market is to have the perception that you're getting played as a franchise. You don't want that kind of a reputation going forward. And yeah, so I would say that right now, LGP is training. End of sentence. Waiting for other developments if they happen. Anticipated from what we have read from a bunch of different places, but right now, LGP is training, period.
Well, and the other thing, too, that I've seen some tweets about, these pictures obviously weren't supposed to come out. I think people have tried to make connections here and yell about things not being handled properly. These pictures weren't supposed to come out. Xolos didn't post them. It's a reporter who posted them, and it's a camera phone picture, you know? I mean, like, it's not supposed to happen. So nobody did anything wrong here in any of it. If he's training, well, they're going to play next weekend. and they're trying to get a deal done. So they need to get the training in. They got to get the deal done. When it gets done, it gets announced. If it doesn't get done, then he comes back to Atlanta. That's where you're at right now. But pictures coming out from a reporter with a camera phone, nobody did anything wrong here. That's just what happens sometimes in other countries.
Nathan is enjoying the fact that you were crapping on Manchester United.
Yeah, it was. I've said it.
They deserve it.
No, they do. They do. And that shows what bad management can do to a club relatively quickly. I mean, it hasn't been that long.
Nope.
But if you don't manage things properly, and you don't manage especially how you handle transfer windows properly, and that's the number one thing from a Manchester United perspective. I mean, the lack of patience, especially when you moved on from Sir Alex Ferguson and you knew you were going to take a hit and you knew it was going to be different, and you don't even get through 1 year with David Moyes, well, then you screwed up the hire or you weren't patient enough. You screwed up something. Either way, you were wrong. Whichever reason why you were wrong, you were still wrong. Then you go through different managers. You go through Louis van Gaal. You go through Jose Mourinho. You get further away from what Manchester United was. That goes back to our identity topic that we talk about a lot. Manchester United lost who they were. And on top of all of that, and this is the most important thing for me, is you've completely mismanaged building a squad. And right now, I don't care who's on the touchline. They're not a top 6 team.
Nope.
It doesn't matter. If it's Ole, if it's somebody else, they're not a top 6 team because they don't have the right roster, because they've handled it poorly, because they haven't built balance in their roster. There's so many different reasons. Now, with MLS being a bigger part of the world transfer market, you've got to manage these things. You've got to manage it because we've seen it in this league too. Look at the LA Galaxy. Let's take the Galaxy as a prime example here. 2011 MLS Cup. Well, let's go back. 2009 Cup final, you lost on penalties. 2010, you lost in the playoffs. 2011, I think it was a conference final in 2010. 2011, MLS Cup champs. 2012, MLS Cup champs. 2013, I think it was a conference final again. You got knocked out. 2014, MLS Cup champs. Maybe the most dominant run that we have seen in this league over that long of a period of time. You had 3 cup champions and a final from 2009 to 2014. What have they done since?
I believe the medical term is bupkis.
Maybe a little more than bupkis. The first couple years after that, they were still competitive, but 2017 was a complete and utter joke. 2018, they didn't make the playoffs and they collapsed at the end. This past year, they made the playoffs and they won a playoff game, and then they got beat by LAFC. So I guess it's a step, but now, where are they? Zlatan, gone. What are they going to look like? They're having to bring in like 10 guys. That's not where you necessarily want to be if you can help it. And I know then people are going to say, well, Atlanta United's going to bring in 8 or 10 guys. But they're not all. Look at the starting lineup. There's a lot of consistency there. You want some continuity. You're going to have rotation. You have to bring guys through, rotate your roster, and bring guys through when guys leave, when you make these sales at the right time. But the Galaxy haven't done that either. You know, they had to buy out Giovanni Dos Santos. They developed a generation of players through LA Galaxy 2, but then they hit a wall playing for the first team because Bruce Arena didn't want to play them, and they cut them all. So now you have nobody coming through. You're having to go out and find guys wherever you can, and you're remaking a team on the fly, and that's not a recipe for success. So you've got to manage all of these things effectively. This situation with Leandro Gonzalez Perez is one of those moments. And if you're able to bring in resources for a player and reload and get younger, potentially get better, it's not a knock on LGP. It's just there are players out there that could be better, could be a better fit now, could be a better fit as a partner for Miles Robinson than LGP was as a partner for Michael Parkhurst, because that's a different situation now. It's a different type of player you might be looking for. That's if those things are there, this is the time to do it.
It's about evolution, not revolution, I guess, for the catchy phrase that you would have your ad guy come up with. It's getting to those next steps and not being stagnant, not continuing to maintain who you are, and it's all about growth. And sometimes growth involves different pieces to the puzzle, and it's just how it is. And that way you're not stagnant on the world stage, you're not stagnant in the domestic competitions, you're still chasing after the goals that you have set for yourself. And it just so happens that sometimes there are going to be different players who are going to be a part of the process, and it is all about making the franchise the best that it can be, and making sure that you're doing right by your players and what you tell them as they're coming in the door about bettering themselves and getting on to the next stop in line. So, I mean, it is an ever-evolving process that you want to be out in front of the entire time, so you're not caught like the Galaxy were. Although I am intrigued with the notion of Alexander Katai in the Galaxy kit. They
fell
still
into
have
their lap. It's a good one to get, but it fell into their lap.
I'm still looking at the defense for the LA Galaxy and wondering how well that's going to be. It's going to take a while for that to get integrated with the pieces that they're wanting to bring in this year, but that's an entirely different conversation. But you don't want to be someone sitting on your hands. You don't want to be, yes, Nathan, Manchester United. You don't want to have that kind of equivalency. You don't want to be that team that basically, I'm going to go ahead and say, you don't want to be Florida State. You don't want to get caught with coaches who have different ideas about levels of success, bringing in certain talent, and then you turn around and you've lost an entire decade of competition in a conference that could very easily be yours, or at least be the number 2 in a conference. You don't want to be that guy, and to continue not to be that guy. I think I put the negative in the right place in that sentence. The infinitive has to be next to each other. Not to be is to not be. Well, my mother was an English major. You don't want to be that guy. So not to be that guy means that you constantly are thinking about where you want to be, how you want to go, and where you want to chase things to do it. What we've seen with NYCFC has been intriguing because they seem to have found something in the European market that not a lot of folks kicked those rocks. NYCFC, I think they're the first team in MLS to kind of go in that direction, and you've seen the talent they've been able to bring. You know, Atlanta United works with South American talent, and now with the relationship with Aberdeen, that's something else that makes the relationships better. So you don't want to sit on your hands, because if you're sitting on your hands, odds are folks are figuring out ways to pass you by. And that's always the next challenge when it comes to being this front office. It's okay, how do we make ourselves better? How do we do right by the players we brought in? How do we continue to evolve and not have it be a shock to the system and continue to chase what we want to be?
And you got to do it at the right time and maximize the return. And that's the key here. And we don't know anything about terms. We don't know anything about this negotiation. We don't know anything about what Leandro Gonzalez Perez could have been requesting in a next contract. You know, at the end of this season, you had another option, but at some point you're going to run out of that, and you're going to have to sign to a new deal if that's where you want to go. The requests might not have fit, and that happens. And if there's a club willing to pay it and the player wants to go, then you find that situation, because then word gets out. Word gets out that Atlanta United did not stand in the way of a player's money, and a player who had the opportunity to make more money elsewhere. And they showed that with Carlos Carmona. And it wasn't a money thing with him, but He requested the move, and it was time to make that move, and they did. Gwen's not barking at me yet. She's barking at stuff outside.
Okay, just checking.
Okay. She's not pawing at me or smacking me yet. But we'll see what happens with this. Could be an interesting day, it's looking like, with those pictures starting to come out. Things maybe start to advance a little bit faster. It's a weird offseason, I think, for Atlanta, but also for a lot of clubs in this league because of the effects of the CBA. Yeah. And I think the reason why that's been cited so many times is that clubs are expecting this to be not just a surface change, it seems like, because you haven't seen everybody out there in the market. The teams you've seen out there spending are the teams that had open spots to spend into. You know, your Kansas Cities, your Vancouvers that have spent on transfer fees. Well, they didn't have designated players in those spots. So it's the same system. They're just using spots that they didn't use before. Teams that are at the top of spending or have filled all of their spots or have used most of their allocation money are the ones who are not as active right now because they don't know what the new landscape is going to look like. Or they don't have the spots even in the current landscape to really work with yet. Now when you see moves of outgoing, you could potentially see moves of incoming because things have opened up. That's going to be the next step here before the CBA is done. And I've seen questions about it, and I think everybody is right there with this. There are concerns because anytime you have a collective bargaining, negotiation, you get into that potential for a strike. And the unions talked about it. I don't think they will. I don't think they would benefit from it. I don't think the league would benefit from it. I don't think anybody wins in that situation. But this is an opportunity for the players to make strong requests and things that I don't think are unfair at this point. I don't think the league is in the same place it was when this last CBA was done, and they definitely weren't in the same place that the previous CBA was. So it's time for some progress. Get on the same page. Get this thing done. Get in a room and get it done. It's 2020 now. Yep. All the talk about we've had conversations, we're heading down the right path, but we don't have anything done yet. Well, you're running out of time. Don't wait till
get things done.
Week. Get it done. Let's get this thing finished off.
Can we get I guess it would still qualify for the current affair breaking news sounder?
Okay.
From Doug Robertson at the AJC, breaking. Hashtag ATL UTD sale of LGP to hashtag Tijuana is complete. Sad to see him go. Always enjoyed talking with him and appreciated his play.
Not a surprise, but that's the update, and this is according to a person with knowledge of the situation. So that has been reported by others as well. I think before it had been reported as very close. This is where things stand now. So again, not a shock here. Not after all of the talk of the last week. I agree with Doug. I mean, Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez was a player that I felt like for the first 2 years of his time in Atlanta, I felt like I was the LGP apologist at times because people zeroed in on, he picked up too many yellow cards. He's reckless. The Houston game in 18 where he had an awful day. He had more individual mistakes like that in 19. It happens. But over the 3 years of his time in Atlanta, he's a vital player. He was a player who made the adjustment from partnering with Michael Parkhurst, being the son role, and then being in the daddy role like he talked about with Miles Robinson coming up in 2019. He's been a leader on and off the field. He's been a very, very important part of Atlanta United from day one on the field. And he's been that off the field, too. He's been a player who's bridged the gap between the Latino players and the non-Latino players. And he's always worn his heart on his sleeve in the way that he plays. And you have to respect that. It's a big loss. It's a big, big loss. And what I hope is that when we've had these conversations, seemingly for the last month, but definitely for the last week, there's multiple things going on here. He's going to be a big loss. He's been a great part of Atlanta United. You wouldn't ever want to just say bye to a player like that. But this is a worldwide transfer market that you're dealing with. You have clubs with money. You have clubs that have maybe more money to spend in certain areas than you do. You have clubs that might value a player differently than you do. You have a club that might offer more money to this player than you would be willing to, or you would be comfortable to, or you'd be able to. And that's where these kinds of moves come up. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been a good time with him here. It doesn't mean he hasn't been effective. They're two different conversations. He's been an incredibly effective player, and he's going to be a hard player to replace. And now you have to go do that, and you're going to have resources to go do that with. And now you're in a different situation than you were when you brought him in. You have proved, I think, the idea of what Atlanta United is on multiple levels of bringing in talented young players, helping them step up in their career, and if the time is right, moving them on. You've shown that. And now, more importantly, on the field, the type of player you're looking for might be a little different because you're not looking for somebody to pair with Michael Parkhurst. Because that was how that went down. Remember, Parkhurst came in, I think, right after the expansion draft or the day of the expansion draft in 2016. LGP was signed a little bit later. Was he on the list? Were there negotiations going on? Absolutely. But he was brought in to partner with Parkhurst. He gave you things that Michael Parkhurst didn't. Now, it's not Michael Parkhurst you're looking for a partner for, it's Miles Robinson. You might be looking for different things. You might be looking for more of a veteran presence. You might be looking for more of that technical player, some of what Michael Parkhurst used to give you. You might be looking for more of that. You might be looking for a future captain, a leader. It's a different situation now than it was then. And with a lot of folks, I know that a lot of folks said what they said about LGP, but for me, you could see that his presence on the back line, especially when you got into playoffs, when you needed that hardened experience, someone who's used to going in for the hard professional tackle and knowing when to chase in and go after the ball and things like that. So that's what I remember about LGP, in addition to his veteran presence at the back, the solid play that you got from him in postseasons, and knowing how to, and in international competition, knowing how to gauge what referees were going to call, knowing what you could do and what you couldn't do in these situations to make sure that your team was as successful as they could be in any given situation. So, it is a big loss, but once again, I will continue to remind folks, just because someone has moved on to another pasture doesn't mean that there haven't been thoughts about bringing individuals in to replace what you're losing right now. It's not, someone's gone, now we start thinking about who we bring in. It's, okay, let's think in two tracks, and that's what you're seeing, and that's what you've seen the entire time with Atlanta United, is thinking in two separate tracks that do blend in their information, but it's not always an if-then, it's thinking simultaneously. Yeah, and you have to. I think top clubs just have to function that way, where when you get to a point that, look, this deal is probably over the 50% mark of likelihood of getting done, well, then you start to think, all right, when it's done, what direction do we go? Who are we calling first? What agent are we calling? What club are we calling? What are the next steps? You have to be prepared, and especially in this sense. And the quotes from the end of the season have made the rounds. Last year you had the Pity Martinez thing be announced late. I don't think that was as much of the issue. Honestly, I think the Miguel Almiron, lingering transfer was maybe more of the issue because that wasn't done until January 31st. And you played a few weeks later in CONCACAF. So you had a lot of, is this going to get done? If it doesn't get done, then what are we going to do? How is this going to work? Before you could truly drill in and prepare. You also had the injury to Franco Escobar that affected everything in your preparation. And that was a huge issue too. So you want to have your team ready to open training camp as close to the final product as possible. Is that always realistic? No. How many times in the Premier League did we see, before they changed the transfer deadline dates, how many times did you see teams after the season started going out and making big moves?
Yep.
It's common. It's just like the CBA negotiation. Sometimes things go down to the wire to get the deal done, to get the move finalized. That might happen here. You don't want it to. And I think Atlanta's in a better place than most are thinking they are if it does take longer. But you don't want that to be the case. You would love it if you go into Motagua with your team that you want to start the season with, and you want to run through the first half of the season in a perfect world all the way to MLS Cup. There's no guarantees, and you might have to make changes along the way, but you hope that that's the case. If it's not, I think this team is in a decent spot, and hopefully they'll be in a better one by the time you get to Motagua. Hopefully you'll be in a better one by the time you get to Birmingham and you get to that preseason game. Buckle up. That's going to be fun now that this finally is not quite done, but is at least being reported as done by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So we'll keep going with it. We'll get into the Friday flashback as well. Rules changes, the history of rules changes, what the upcoming future role of rules changes could be with IFAB and FIFA. We'll be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Apelinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2. Soccer Down here. A little bit later than normal. I blame Mother Nature. I blame internet. I blame
technology.
Yeah, I blame stupid weather, technology, and anything else I can blame.
Nothing
but you
wrong
get
with
the Birmingham, the Central Time Zone edition of the show today.
And speaking of which, a little over about 5 weeks from now, I think we're going to be there, right?
Yes, we shall be.
So February 8th, if I'm not mistaken, Atlanta United Birmingham Legion. And we'll try to figure out a way to take Jay Heaps up on his invitation of taking a look at what's going on with the Legion when he did the 1v1 with us. He said, yep, come on over. We'll show you what's going on. So we're going to come on over and see what's going on.
All right, we got a little bit more of this. This has just been tweeted from @USMNT, U.S. Men's National Team Twitter news. After spending the last 3 seasons with Atlanta United, Aaron Hyde has been appointed as U.S. Men's National Team goalkeeper coach. So there you go.
There you go.
They're not hiring youth national team coaches just yet, but they're hiring goalkeeper coaches.
Yes, they're not hiring the dudes that will wander the touchline. How many are they lacking? All of them?
All of them, except for one on the women's side.
Yeah. So, but congrats to Aaron Hyde for getting the goalkeeper coach addition to the resume. And Daniel Price, after our discussion in hour number 1, says that one of his favorite players is moving on. Very sad to see him go. The positive note is now he has a Liga MX team to follow now.
Yeah, and that's what I think will happen more and more. You know, we talked about this with Jessica Charman. I think you have a lot of Atlanta United fans who now follow Newcastle because they follow Miguel Almiron. I think you'll see the same with this, and that's okay. It's all about the next steps. As I've said many times, I think the lack of rumors and that being what people are judging things by is an unfair thing to judge it by, because rumors don't matter. It's going to be the movement that happens and when it happens and the quality of said moves. That's what's important. How many rumors are out there about a team? I mean, that doesn't mean anything. So now we see if this deal gets finalized, and it's being reported as such, according to Doug Robertson at the AJC, who replaces Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez. I don't think there is a ready-made replacement in the team today. I think the team can get by today, but I don't think there is a ready-made replacement. The biggest question would be a player like Franco Escobar. We have not seen Franco Escobar as a center back in a 4-man back line in an Atlanta United shirt. He played that for Newell's during his time there, which he didn't play very much for the first team. But here he has been a center back with 3 center backs. He has been a right back in a 4-man back line, and he's been a right wing back in a 3-5-2/5-3-2. Can he play as a center back next to Miles Robinson? Don't know. We don't know that yet. That's a question. Jeff Larinowitz is on this roster as well. We have seen him play as a center back. We've seen him play as a center back, I believe, with Miles Robinson, but not in a 4-man back line. I think they've been in the same group in a trio at different points. Not often, but it's happened. Could he become that replacement? He could. I don't think that's your long-term option at all. So you have short-term options. You have George Campbell as well. That's asking a lot for a player in his first season in MLS. He has risen the ranks very quickly. I don't think you want to push him too far too fast. And then Miles Robinson's role changes from being, I think, a little more aggressive, a little bit more of the cleanup guy, to somebody who is having to organize with a younger partner next to him. I don't know if Miles is ready for that kind of role change yet. So you're going to have an opening. You're going to have to go and take this slot when you look at the roster and you look at the salary and make the most of it. And then that brings you back to a couple other questions. Julian Gressel wants a new contract. Now you just opened up things. Is this going to be a move that allows you to give Julian Gressel a new contract? It could. Is that how you want to use this? Or, and then if let's follow that path for a second. If you do that, if you move Gressel into that kind of spot, and it doesn't have to be the exact salary amount, but roughly a player who is on a deal that requires TAM or GAM to buy it down, and you move him into that slot. Well, one, then you need to make sure you're going to play a shape, a formation, a style that gets the best out of a player that you're committing those resources to. We've seen Julian Gressel look his best in a 3-5-2 as a right wing back. That would likely mean that you're putting Franco Escobar as a center back with Miles Robinson and with somebody else. Could be Jeff Larentowicz in that scenario. George Bello on the left side as a left wing back. Where does that put Brooks Lennon? If you're putting Gressel there, do you put Lennon as the wing back? Do you think Gressel can provide that type of production as a central midfielder? And then you're putting Gressel into a mix with Heineman, with Remedi, with Mo Adams. Potentially. But these are the next steps. So now you have opened up something that the whole conversation about Gressel, now you've opened up that kind of opportunity if you want to use those resources in that way.
That was what I was going to ask. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask when you were bringing where Gressel would fit, because we've seen him as a wingback. We've seen him somewhat in the midfield, but midfield was where my attention had been drawn because of the logjam of personnel there with Adams and Remedi and Heineman and all that. So that was going to be my follow-up question, which you pretty much knocked into there, was the positioning and probabilities and possibilities of where Julian Gressel could fit into all this.
I think the number one thing first is going to be what your defense looks like. And that now would be a much bigger question. So what level of resources are you going to use to go out and add a center back? And I think you might honestly need to look at adding 2 center backs unless Jeff Larentowicz is going to be your depth there and he's not going to be as involved in the midfield group. And if other rumors are to be trusted and the Matias Villasanti addition is a possibility, Roberto Rojas has reported it. Many others in Paraguay have reported it. It's gotten a little quiet lately. Rojas also added that Monterrey was interested.
Yep.
But if you add him, then you have plenty of cover in central midfield. And if Jeff Larentowicz becomes your rotation option, first off the bench as a center back, but also can give you a spell in midfield as well, you might be covered. But I think you're going to need a center back. And the question is going to be, are you going to be a setup that allows Franco Escobar to play center back a good bit? And that's probably going to mean 3 center backs. Maybe you're looking at a different kind of center back than if you're going to play 4-3-3 or some variation of that, and you're looking for a partner for Miles Robinson with 2 center backs. That gets to that next level conversation of, yeah, you can put together a list of center backs all day, and yeah, they might fit in a price point, and they've performed well, or they have potential, but are they going to be the right fit for you? And that's where that next level scouting comes in. Are they going to be the right fit to give you flexibility? Is that going to be a key part of this team going forward? Do you want a team like we saw last year that can play a 4-3-3, that can play a 4-4-2 at times, that can play a 4-2-3-1, any variation of 4 in the back, along with having 3 center backs to play 3-5-2 or to play 5-3-2 when you want, or 5-4-1 or 3-4-3 or blah, 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 blah. You get the point.
Number.
Yeah, and they're not as important as some will make them, but that difference is the important part here at center back. Are you looking to settle on a 4-back or a 3/5 back? Or do you want flexibility between the two? Because if you want flexibility, you're probably looking at a different addition than if you want just to play 3 in the back primarily, 3 center backs, or if you're going to play a line of 4 primarily. Those are different needs, and that's going to be a big part of this going forward. I think in a perfect world, you get somebody who is comfortable doing all of the above, because then you have more flexibility. That might not be possible, because the more flexibility you try to get, that type of player becomes a more difficult one to find. We'll see what it looks like. But I think now, when we're looking for rumors, because that's a big issue here, you're looking to hear what those rumors could be at center back. And they could lead you to that next step of, okay, this guy's only played in a 3-back. This guy's played in both. This guy's only really played with 4 in the back. He's never played with 3 in the back. Those things are going to be the important things to look for when those rumors pop up. If they pop up, they might not. You might just have a deal get announced one day.
Yep. And Daniel, obviously, is very, very optimistic in his thought patterns to replace LGP Open tryouts, and he thinks I could do it. The answer to that, Daniel, is no.
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 You don't want that.
No.
Mm-mm.
You just made the list!
No.
There you go. See, on a Friday, made the list. Matt Wagner's in this morning after the Aaron Hyde announcement. He says, great move for Hyde, but I do remember the Montreal match last year and wonder if part of this has to do with the conflict between FDB and Hyde. I'm happy for Hyde, but a big loss for us.
It's a big loss because of Hyde's relationship with Brad Gazan. And they've worked together before, because Hyde had been part of the national team program at different points. So they had a relationship. That's the part that is going to be the loss. Goalkeeper coaches are a little different, and different managers use them in different ways. Sometimes they're very involved in the defensive side of the tactics. Sometimes they're more involved in just set pieces. Sometimes they just focus on goalkeepers. Sometimes they are goalkeeper-centric, but then dig down into the academy side of it as well. I'm not there day to day. I don't know what all of the responsibilities were, but you had that, whatever it was, in Montreal, and you had the fallout of it. So is this a shock? No. I think it worked out in the best situation it could for all concerned. If it wasn't working, if it wasn't a fit after the managerial change, if you've had some friction, you have an opportunity to go to the national team as the goalkeeper coach. That's a great fit for Aaron Hyde. And now you get to move on, and that friction is gone.
Apparently, Daniel's sarcasm was also implied in referencing that I could be back at the back line for Atlanta United.
I
at
kind
the age
of
of 39,
that,
repeating. Yes.
Maybe I was just hopeful.
Yes. So we are caught up on Twitters. What else is on your mind this morning? You want to get into rules?
Yeah, we'll get there. One sec. Let's get a quick rumor update, because they're stacking up a bit.
Yes.
Let's get into this just right here. So, there you go. Paul Tenorio is reporting. It has not been announced yet, but he's reporting that New York City will get a permanent transfer done with Benfica to keep Keaton Parks. It's a great get for New York City. So they still need a manager, but that's a great get to keep Keaton Parks in the fold. DC United is rumored to be potentially spending a lot of money. And they did on Wayne Rooney, so it's not a shock that they're finally starting to spend money. But this would be even more money than they've spent in recent years. So you've got Juan Manuel Figueroa, who's a reporter from Medio Tiempo. He is reporting that Peruvian winger Edison Flores will be leaving Morelia, heading to D.C. United. He was linked at one point with a move to Seattle. That has changed. It's going to be D.C., according to Figueroa. He's 25 years old, mostly a winger, can play centrally. He's valued at just under $3.5 million on Transfermarkt. 7 goals in 21 matches in the Apertura and the playoffs for Morelia. 3 goals in the postseason, which is pretty big. Great get. And they're still linked, according to Stephen Goff of the Washington Post, with a move for Brian Lozano of Santos Laguna, which would possibly be an 8-figure transfer if they're going to get that done. They've got the space. They've got the holes in that team. They need key players. They need key attacking players especially. If you get Flores and you get Lozano, one, then DC's spending is completely and utterly changed. And 2, you're going to have a team that you're going to have to keep an eye on. They're still going to need depth. They're still going to need more pieces around that, but you're adding 2 big-time impact players if they get both. Just Flores is still a big addition. I think that's an upgrade from Lucas Rodriguez, who is back at Estudiantes training in Argentina. Galaxy still trying to get the deal done for Peruvian center back Carlos Zambrano. Talks are ongoing, according to Kevin Baxter of the LA Times. On the other side, you've got Alianza Lima in Peru reportedly pondering a move for Vancouver attacker Jordi Reyna. This is coming from Libero in Peru. 26 years old, he came up through Alianza Lima, made his pro debut there, went to Red Bull Salzburg, came to Vancouver in 2017. He's been good. Don't know what kind of offers on the table. Don't know if Vancouver's willing to make the move, but this is that kind of move we talked about with Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez, a player who has come to MLS and bettered their situation. Now, with Reyna, it's a little different because he'd be going back to a club that he started at, but they're going to have to spend the money to make it happen. Another club that would have to spend big coin if they're going to make this happen is Club America. And it's according to Marca, Club America have made Jonathan Dos Santos their top transfer market. Gio is there after his contract was bought out by the Galaxy. Now, Jonathan Dos Santos is on the record saying he wants to stay in Los Angeles. He told Mundo Deportivo during the Liga MX final that playing for Club America had been his dream, but he's happy with the Galaxy, and he even hopes to retire there. Is that talk to boost up an offer? Maybe. Boost up a contract? Maybe. Is it legit? Maybe. Keep an eye on that one, because that would be a big loss for the Galaxy if Club America comes in with that kind of money, unless the Galaxy then take that kind of money and go out into the market and get even better, because that can happen too. So you're getting rumors on the incoming and the outgoing side.
And especially for the Galaxy, that's a good thing.
Yeah. No, they've got lots of business they need to take care of.
And seeing, how with the Whitecaps, with Jordi Reyna, okay, you try to hang on to him, or do you try to, because Vancouver needs all the help they get. I'm noticing a lot of folks out west who need a lot of help.
Because the Western Conference, it's not that they're weak and they need a lot of help. It's the Western Conference keeps raising the level.
Yeah.
Portland goes out and makes the move that they make to get better. Sporting Kansas City says, we don't want to be missing the playoffs. They go out and they get Alan Pulido. Minnesota got into the playoffs. They don't want to fall out of that. LAFC set a high bar. Dallas has set a high bar. Real Salt Lake has set a high bar, and Dallas and RSL have done it in a different way. It's not easy to just coast in the West now. You've got to be aggressive. Colorado's got to be aggressive. Vancouver's got to be aggressive. Houston's got to be aggressive.
And we're seeing NYCFC being aggressive, trying to keep Keaton Parks. That would be huge.
Yeah, it'd be big. I mean, he hasn't broken through at Benfica. If you're able to get a good contract and come back here, this is that perception. this is where things have changed, where even young American players who went to Europe and were told, you got to go to Europe. You've got to play there. Carl Robinson from Oxford United would be leading the charge for this. You shouldn't play in America. It's the wrong time in your career. But if you're not playing at Benfica and you have the opportunity to go get paid handsomely, play in a place that I think you were comfortable in, you take it. It's not the old MLS of bad quality and you're not going to be able to leave the league later because people are going to look at it as, oh, well, you were playing there. That's not going to be good for us to bring you in. Those things are changing. Now it's more of, okay, you went there, you played well. We know what that level is. We've seen it transfer. Okay. If Parks isn't playing at Benfica, comes to New York, plays a couple years, does well, he can still go back to Europe and go to a place where he's actually going to play.
Yep.
That's the important element. Just going to a team and having it on a CV doesn't make you a better player. You got to play. You got to be in a spot to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because you've got IBM or Google on your resume and all you did was fetch coffee or answer phones, yippee, you worked at IBM or Google and had that on your resume. It doesn't mean that you were part of the developing of something for IT or AI or something like that. There's a big difference.
Yeah. There's a big difference now because people aren't just swayed by, ooh, that's a fancy name on there. You're looking for quality. You're looking for what somebody can actually do, not they lucked into a good spot somewhere. It's the same on the soccer side. You're looking for somebody who has produced, not just sat on a bench somewhere. Keaton Parks needs to produce. He needs to play to be able to do that. If New York is the best spot for him to do that, that's where he needs to be. He's a national team level player, but he's got to play. He has to play. It's critical. The release from Atlanta United on Aaron Hyde departing the club, Carlos Bocanegra said, "We want to thank Aaron for his contributions to the club as he is an excellent coach who provided great leadership for our goalkeeping group. He embodied the culture of the club and helped drive the group forward. We wish him the best as he pursues an exciting career opportunity with U.S. Soccer and the possibility to go to a World Cup." That's your quote from Carlos Bocanegra about Aaron Hyde leaving Atlanta United to join the U.S. men's national team as its goalkeeper coach.
A couple of other thoughts from Daniel. With all the movement in the West, how can we assume this will affect the East? Will the East fall behind in the talent and quality race? At this point, it seems that the West will be the stronger conference.
I mean, you can look at it from top to bottom, and yes, I think the West is the top conference. But when you look at Toronto, when you look at Atlanta, when you look at New York City, the top three teams in the East, last year, Philadelphia was 3. I don't know if they're 3 truly now with Toronto doing what we think they're going to end up doing and adding a designated player to a group that was already really good. The top of the East is as good as the top of the West. And that's what really matters. I mean, I don't think anybody is out there chanting, Western Conference, Western Conference. It doesn't matter.
Too many syllables.
Yeah, it's not like the conferences in college football, which is a stupid thing anyway. Yeah, we're going to chant SEC and pull for, one of your school's rivals because they're in the same conference.
No.
Nobody
the answer is
cares.
no.
No, people do it, and it's stupid. It's not about the conference. It's about your team. And the top of the East is as good as the top of the West. I think the West overall will be more competitive because I think there's more teams pushing for the top. Right now, I feel like today, and this is January 3rd, and rosters are nowhere near done, I think Toronto, Atlanta, New York City will be your best 3 teams in the East. I think New England is the one who could push into the 4 spot. DC, if they get crazy and bold and aggressive, have the potential to push into that conversation too. But I think New England right now is best constructed as the number 4.
Then Daniel followed that up. He says, adding on to the thought, this also negatively impacts the value of Supporters Shield. You ain't playing everyone. If the level is higher in a place you only play maybe once, if at all, it brings the value down.
Supporters Shield was already less important than I think some people wanted it to be. And now with the new format, it's even less important. Daniel's right. I mean, if you're a team in the East, you're probably going to be playing a weaker level of competition on a regular basis because you're only playing 10 teams out West. You're only going on the road 5 times. And if the West is top to bottom more competitive and a little bit better, then you're getting easier games in the East to supplement tougher games playing teams out West. So the Supporters Shield winner, if all that is true, should come out of the East. And it doesn't mean much because you're not playing everybody. And the unbalanced schedules that we had before are going to be even more unbalanced. And that's just what it is. It's going to be the playoffs that decide the winner, and that's the most important thing.
Then should Supporters Shield still be a part of the equation when it comes to CONCACAF Champions League?
Yeah, because it does put an importance on the regular season. I mean, you need it, and you need the Open Cup to be part of that mix because it can further diversify it a bit. Now, what I wonder is the move I would make with this format is that MLS Cup winner, Supporters Shield winner, Open Cup winner go to the Champions League. That 4 spot that goes to the other conference regular season winner from the Supporters Shield winner, maybe that needs to go to the MLS Cup runner-up.
And that was where I was leaning because you could have something that's, for me, added importance. Since the Supporters Shield seems to be going further back and further back and further back in the level of importance when it comes to MLS, why not let MLS Cup runner-up be that new one?
Yeah, it used to be that, and then they went away from it. I think you might need to reconsider it. All right, let's get into the Friday flashback. This is what you guys voted for. Rule changes. And when we do the Friday flashback, we're looking back into the history of the game in some aspect. So I did not realize. I kind of knew this, but I didn't realize the severity of it. So you had a bunch of chaos with the laws of the game in the early days of the sport, just like any sport, as they're figuring out actually what the thing is and how to quantify it, how to make it consistent across different places. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you really didn't have any changes from the 30s until the 90s to the laws of the game. So when you see the outcry and the massive freakouts and everything about these changes now, you do have to keep that in mind a little bit. The game has been unbelievably consistent from the 30s, the advent of the World Cup, until now. I think by far the biggest change, and Nathan Pugh mentioned this, and I remember a little bit of the game before this, and when I go back and watch like old footage, it still kind of shocks me a bit. The back pass rule. The back pass rule in modern times made the biggest change to soccer. And I think we're only really seeing in the last decade the true effects of it. For those of you who are unfamiliar, in the past, and this ended with the 92-93 season. I think the last major competition that used it was the 1992 European Championships. The 92 Olympics might have used it as well, but the 92 Euros, that, all the way back to the beginning, you could pass the ball back to your goalkeeper and they could pick it up. So just think about that for a minute. You're a team that's very defensive. You don't want to risk anything. You don't want to get caught. You want to kill time. What do? You pass it back to your goalkeeper. He picks it up. He dribbles it around for a minute with his hand. He walks around, stalks around the box, punts it long. Or, if you want to get really cynical, fakes like he's going to punt it long, rolls it out to a defender, then you restart the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Awful. It was awful. And the 1990 World Cup that was very defensive, the 92 Euros were both kind of the tipping point for this. Like, this is not going to work anymore. We need to change this. And I think it's now, in this past decade, where we've seen the advent of pressing teams that you get that full effect. Because you couldn't do that before. You know, it took time for managers to catch up and understand that, hey, this is something that, you know, your greats of the game in the 80s, the 70s, the 60s as managers, they didn't have the opportunity to play that style because all you did to kill it was pass it back to your goalkeeper and he picks it up and he walks around for a while. So now you can press teams and force them into turnovers and make goalkeepers have to play with their feet. That's had the biggest impact of any of these changes. And the major reason is it's one of the oldest of these major changes.
Yeah, for me, when you brought this topic, I didn't know how far back you wanted to go when it came to laws of the game.
Well,
I was
want
thinking,
to get into like the first college football game in the United States. Some would tell you that it was far more soccer than football.
Yeah,
you know, we're not going to get into the days where you couldn't be ahead of the ball. I mean, it was basically rugby, like because you couldn't pass forward. You could because players couldn't be ahead of the ball, so you had to just constantly pass back and then dribble. You know, that's unrecognizable. I mean, there were all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Like you didn't have referees on the field initially.
Yeah, that was the first thing that popped into my head when I was doing my research on this. Was, you know, being a contemporary of that particular rule. When you didn't have refs on the field until, was it 1891 or something like that?
Yeah, it's around that
late
time.
Late 19th century. So when I was a young kid in the late 19th century, they finally introduced, you know, refs could be actually on the field. But yeah, for me, it's the back pass, it's the harsh challenge from behind, and then offside. Those were the three that popped into my head.
Well, you didn't need referees back in the day because soccer started in public schools. And there was an assumption that a gentleman would never deliberately commit a foul. It wouldn't happen. So once you actually started to call fouls and you realized that, all right, not having the captains argue over that was a foul. No, it wasn't a foul. Anybody who's played pickup has been in that situation before.
Yep.
Then you went to having like umpires on the side. And they were appointed by the captain. So basically you have two different people to argue. So you still don't have a referee out there. When you added the referee in 1891, and this is something I'd never heard of before, when you actually realize that fouls will occur and players will deliberately kick people and commit fouls, like that's going to happen. So you have to punish it. You have a free kick. It was originally called the kick of death. That's amazing. That's unbelievable. So a little bit about how IFAB came into account, and I think at times there's a little bit of confusion as to what is IFAB, what is FIFA, does FIFA write the rules, does IFAB write the rules, yada yada. So FIFA became a member of IFAB in 1913, a few years after FIFA started itself. IFAB was a creation to actually have consistent rules. And it was made up of 2 reps from each of the associations of the United Kingdom. And this is in the late 1800s, so it was England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. First met in 1886. When FIFA jumped on, you still had to have a 75% majority for a proposal to pass. That's why you haven't had a bunch of rule changes. But instead of 2 from England, 2 from Scotland, 2 from Wales, 2 from Ireland, they each got 1, FIFA got 4, but neither block could control IFAB because you needed that 75%. So we talked about everything getting more defensive. We talked about it getting more cynical. You started to see some changes in 1990. And these amendments were referred to as the good of the game. So the offside law tweaked in 1990. The advantage was now given to the attacking team. The even is on idea, right? Mm-hmm. You also had the denying of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity, DOGSO, the professional foul. That became something that you could get sent off for. That's 1990. That's a big change. It's not that long ago. It's 30 years ago. When you look back at the history of the game, go back and watch some of the challenges of what you would think is DOGSO in today's game that was nothing back in the day. Just brutality. And you could get away with it because you weren't going to get sent off for it. The pass-back rule changed, 92. The fierce tackle from behind became a red card in 98. That's not just a DOGSO situation, but the tackle from behind. This is coming after Pelé. This is coming after Maradona. This is coming after all of those great creative players that, how did you handle them? You kicked the ever-loving crap out of them from behind.
Mm-hmm.
This gave creative players a little more hope because it was very easy to kick creative players out of games back in the day. Go read about the 1966 World Cup and how Pelé was basically punted all over the field by everybody Brazil played and knocked them out of the tournament in the group stage because he was injured. That's not what FIFA eventually realized they wanted. When the criticism of the negativity, of the defensiveness, of the cynicism got too much, FIFA and IFAB started to act and started to push the game into what we see much more of today. But if you go back and watch highlights from the 90 World Cup, from the 92 Euros, from the 86 World Cup, it looks a little different. Like the game felt different. It's very different now because of those changes in the 90s.
Jill Robbins comes in this morning. She says, agree about the law changes involving goalkeepers, including 4 steps versus 6 seconds, and especially the pass back being the most impactful change. Now, watch for the evolution of offside, from even is off to even is on to what is even, LOL. That's what VAR will do for the game. Scoring will go up.
Yeah, I think that's the next wave. That's the next major change. VAR is a big change, but I think that the evolution of the offside rule will be the next thing that pushes the game forward. VAR's just shined a spotlight on it. And that's, I think, when people yell about VAR, look at how much of it involves offside. Because you could never have the amount of detail that you do now. And offside, as the law is written, is very clear. It's you're on or you're off. It has nothing to do with margins of error or how far you're off or anything like that. It's very simple. You are off, you are on. And VAR allows you to get very detailed, far more than you could with the naked eye. Now, there are ways that you can tweak VAR to maybe not give you as much detail or ignore detail, which I don't know if that's really where you want. I think you're much better to redefine the offside law and figure out what that looks like. That's going to be the next step. And there's not an easy fix. I disagree with the, just make it the feet. Just make it margin of error with a thick yellow line and stuff like that. I don't think there's one obvious solution here. And that's why I think you're going to have to do a little bit of trial and error. You're going to have to try some things out. The question is how you manage VAR in the meantime while you're figuring that out. Because IFAB has come out and said they don't want VAR to be used in the way that it is in England and other leagues that use the Hawkeye system to determine offside. Because it's giving you this level of detail. IFAB has said they don't want you to have to go to all these camera angles and take the time. That's where they've went to. And they've tried to say, go back to clear and obvious, which doesn't have a true definition in the laws of the game or in the VAR protocols or any of it. Clear and obvious to you could mean something different than clear and obvious to me. That needs to be cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the beginning of MLS, though. Because
here's the fun part.
It's one thing with the laws of the game and how the game looked worldwide. Anybody who's followed the game in this country for an extended period of time, you're going to remember some just absolute dumbness. So MLS, this isn't even the true dumbness. And I know Jill can tell the story about the old USISL, which is now the USL, when they were a third division league, fourth division league. And they were really trying some stuff. They had, and if I remember it right, Jill calls it the charge of the light brigade. They had a situation where if a team committed a certain number of fouls, a player, not even the 35-yard shootout idea, which we'll get to in a minute, they had this situation where you got basically a free run at goal from just inside your own half. But the thing was, everybody else was lined up like at the midway line, I think. So you might have had like a 10-yard head start. And the ref would blow the whistle and you'd take off. It was when you hit a certain number of fouls and a half, like I don't know if it was 5 or 7 or whatever. It was trying to like, you know, stamp down on cynical foul play. I get the concept, I get the idea, but dumb.
10-yard sprint.
No, it wasn't a 10-yard sprint. It was a 40-yard sprint. You just had a 10-yard head start.
That's what I'm saying, 10-yard head start.
Yeah, you had a 10-yard head start, and you've got 20 people chasing you.
Tag, you're it.
Just ridiculous. So they tried that. Luckily, that didn't last very long. They tried larger goals at one point. I know when the Atlanta Magic played outdoors, either 93 or 94, they tried larger goals. That was part of a test that was approved by FIFA. I think they had some partnership with like Quick Goal or something to provide these larger goals.
How larger?
Not crazy larger, but I want to say a yard. I don't think 2 yards. Maybe 4 or 5 feet wider and taller. Like it wasn't ridiculously oversized, but it was larger. And this is something Alexi Lawless has campaigned for this in the past, because it is a valid point that goalkeepers today are far bigger than they were when goals were originally created.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't see 6'7" goalkeepers back in the day. You didn't see 6'7" people really walking around on a regular basis back in the day. So, you know, do you need to have a bigger goal because of that? I understand the logic behind it. I don't think you do. I disagree with the idea, but I get why you would think that way. So USISL got really weird with rules. MLS got weird. The biggest thing that will throw you off if you watch early MLS games is the clock. It counted down, and the scoreboard clock was the time. Now, the ref could stop the scoreboard clock, and those of you who are involved in high school, at least in Georgia, I don't know if every state does it this way, and college know that that's how it goes. You know, refs have to make a motion to stop the clock gets stopped, but it's the scoreboard clock that is the time. I remember a situation in the A-League in 98 with the Ruckus, where the Ruckus scored with, I want to say 4 seconds left on the clock to win a game. And it was by the scoreboard clock, and you knew what it was. So time was counting down. Atlanta had a throw-in deep in the other team's half. I think it was against Jacksonville. And, I can't remember the player's name. He was a former Georgia State player. Did the flip throw off the track at Adams Stadium and threw it from the edge of the track, which was right up against the touchline, basically, to the back post, and it was headed in.
Wow.
but with just a few seconds left on the clock, and you could see the seconds left on the clock. So they did that for the first 4 years of the league. They did the 35-yard shootout to break ties. I still will put my hand up and say that I like that better to break a tie than a penalty shootout.
Yeah.
You don't need to break ties in the regular season, though, and I'm very thankful that they have gotten away from that. But in other situations where you have a penalty shootout, I like the 35-yard one better. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
They also had
like
that thing with the fourth substitution for goalkeepers, and Bob Bradley was the one who I remember completely throwing this in the face of the rules makers, because what you did in this situation was, okay, you're a fourth sub and it has to be the goalkeeper, right? So how do you get around this to get a bonus fourth sub? You, on the field, have your goalkeeper switch with the player you want to sub.
Yeah.
You put that player in goal at a stoppage in play. So then they're going to have to play in goal until the next stoppage. But then you sub them out and you put in somebody else to play goalkeeper who is going to go on the field at the next stoppage, because then you put your original goalkeeper who was playing right back or left back or who knows where, and you sub them, wrong terminology. You switch them back to goalkeeper, and they come back into goal. The player that you subbed on becomes a bonus fourth substitution, and boom.
Yeah, it's like when you decide to move a pitcher to a position in baseball for a batter or two and bring in another pitcher, and then you put the pitcher who was out in right field hanging out for an out or two, you put him back on the mound after the situation's passed.
It was that idea, yep. And Bob Bradley did that, and I think it helped him win a game with the Metro Stars against DC United. Then they said, this is kind of dumb because you can abuse this, so we're going to get rid of this rule too. When you think back to some of the more recent changes, so 2009 is when UEFA started a trial by using the extra assistant referees. 2012 is when you added that to all UEFA competitions. I've always wondered how effective that really is, because they're not really involved in much of anything. I think maybe it helps in a way that we don't see very much in terms of communication now on the headset, because you have extra eyes. And if that's effective, cool, then maybe it's something you need to explore across the board. Goal line technology used in England, first time in 2013. VAR introduced at the Confederations Cup in 2017. MLS started using it in August of 2017, along with some other leagues. The changes ahead of this season, though, some people called it radical. Mark Geiger said he pointed out 12 different significant changes to the laws of the game going into 2019-20. And VAR has gotten so much of the focus, but there's a lot of differences now with the laws of the game that haven't really come up as much yet. The goal kicks. I'm really curious to see if teams who want to dominate possession in MLS in the upcoming season play that short goal kick, because it doesn't have to leave the 18 now. But you can't step into the 18 to defend until the goal kick is taken. So you get basically a free pass. Will teams use that more? Haven't seen a ton of it around the world, but we do see some teams that employ it.
Tafka, in our discussions this morning, says he would just remove VAR from offside. It causes a delay/stifling/reversal of the excitement of a goal and is getting crazy with the degree of accuracy desired to reverse calls. I'd rather an occasional bad call. We aren't using replay for calling strikes in baseball. Shrugged shoulders emoji.
But let me follow the logic with you here. So you are checking all goals, right?
Yep.
You're checking them for anything in the attacking phase of play. That's going to be part of it. You're going to have to make broader changes. And is it a good thing to change something that allows you to be more accurate? A strike is very different. I don't think that's an accurate comparison. because a strike is a judgment call. There's no way for it to be anything other than a judgment call.
Because it
Offside.
sure as hell isn't shoulders to knees anymore.
No, it's a judgment call by an umpire. That's why VAR tries to avoid situations that are judgment calls. That's why offside doesn't fall into that, because it is not a judgment call. The way it is written, it is straight up, yes or no. So asking the system to be less accurate kind of goes against the idea of it. That's why I think the law is the bigger issue than VAR. I do agree it takes too much time right now, and if that's something that can change, then maybe that makes it better. I think the law needs to be addressed, and that's more of the issue for me than actually using it for offside. If you want to figure out a way to define clear and obvious in offside situations in VAR reviews on goals, okay, I'd like to see how that can be done in a consistent way. I just don't know if it's possible. I really don't.
For me, the whole thing with VAR is not VAR. People are yelling at VAR when really they need to yell at the laws of the game. I don't think that VAR is the problem. The technology is there to lay out a decision and a review from the rules that are currently in the book, from the laws that are currently on hand. So for me, it's not the idea of the video assistant that needs to get looked at. It has to be what they're told they're looking for.
So, okay, I'm sorry. I got to jump in here because I just read something that gets in my head.
Uh-oh.
It's like that. It's like, yes, this is what goes off in my head. This is what happens when I read it. So, earlier in the week, IFAB General Secretary Lucas Brood, remember what he said, right?
He went off. He was not a fan of the Premier League.
He went off, but what did he go off on? He went off about VAR being involved in offside, and it's clear and obvious, and he went off on all these things that were confusing
Not
everybody.
how we envisioned it being made, yeah.
Well, new quotes from IFAB General Secretary Lucas Brood. These are from Dale Johnson, ESPN on Twitter. Offside is offside. The Premier League has not contravened protocol. Quote, if images with calibrated lines show there is an offside, the VAR should continue to report, even if it is only a centimeter. Offside is offside. So why did you say these things before this week? So his quotes on Monday were just to remind of the basic principle. No, don't disregard. They were just to remind of the basic principle of the clear, obvious mistake. Brood said a tolerance limit on offside is out of the question. You're not going to create a margin of error. You're not going to create a thicker yellow line. You're not going to create anything like that, according to this guy. So he said, quote, VAR must quickly understand whether there is an offside. He should not line up every minute for every perspective, every minute for every perspective. It's translated from German. So, the Premier League did not do anything wrong, but they did a couple days earlier, I guess. They thought they did, but they didn't, but they did. Yeah. There could be some things lost in translation. I will give Lucas Brood a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, but more confusion over this whole situation. Let's see if we can get a couple things nailed down about VAR as a whole that we can agree upon and move forward. So the goal for Liverpool, that was initially waved off because of a handball. I can't remember. Was it Mane who they thought had stretched the arm out and brought it down, but it was actually off his chest?
Yeah. Or was it Van Dijk?
No, the Van Dijk one's different. This is the one that the goal was scored on that was initially waved off and then given to Liverpool because of the use of VAR. Situations like that. Let's take offside out of the conversation for a second. Situations like that, to fix bad calls, whether it is a handball that is incorrect, whether it's a call that the referee was screened and couldn't see it, whether it's a call like we saw in the A-League where the referee gave a yellow, the VAR is like, bruh. He went in, studs up at the guy's kneecap.
Yeah.
Oh, let me take a look at that. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, cool. Yeah, red card.
It was Mane against Wolves.
Okay. In those situations, does anybody have a problem with VAR? I don't think so.
No.
So when we're getting calls right, VAR is a good thing. Liverpool was probably pretty happy with that goal, right?
Yeah.
Lots of goals in the Women's World Cup where an AR put a flag up, now put it up late and it was delayed and followed the protocol, but they said, no, that's offside. That should not be a goal. And then they went back and looked at it and they said, no, that's onside. The AR was wrong. It is a goal. And the goal stood because you let it play out. In those situations, which is the overwhelming usage of VAR, where they fix mistakes or they don't allow mistakes to happen that would have previously happened, I think everybody's good with VAR. The complaints come down to two things in my book. It's not the whole thing about VAR is killing my game, VAR is killing the game, people are not watching the game because of VAR. All that's a bunch of nonsense. It's two things. It's the amount of time it takes to get the decision.
Yeah.
And it's offside. And that's far more of the law than the actual VAR process of it. Because when you see it, now, there's been a couple that, man, I'm having to look pretty close to see the actual offside body part. There's been a few that have been incredibly close. Man, you're having to take a third and fourth look after they've broken it down for you. Like, yeah, it's the heel or the toe or the armpit or whatever.
You got a big nose.
Yeah, he's got a big nose, so he's offside. There's a few that have been incredibly close like that. But even most of those offside decisions, you might not like that it's half a foot off, but again, it's off.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, that was a crapshoot on how it would be called. I think this idea that ARs never got calls wrong in the past. I mean, go back and read some of your tweets, people.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crapshoot on if that was correct. Now it is correct by the letter of the law, but we don't necessarily like how you get there or why it's correct. That goes back to the actual law to me. So as a whole, I think VAR is a good thing for the game. They have to get the timing better. They have to make that part better. The pitch side monitors in the Premier League, that protocol, that's where the Premier League is being obtuse about it.
Yep.
They've got to get over the arrogance and get calls right. And if looking at it again helps you, do it. But the biggest issue is offside, and it's far more of the law that's the issue than the actual VAR. The Hawkeye system just allows you to see things that you couldn't see before. And if we don't want to see those things, that's a different conversation. If we want to put the blinders on, I don't want to know if it's offside. Is that what we want? I don't know.
Yeah. Tafka now says his weekend mission is to define clear and obvious for offside. Got it.
Yeah, have fun with that, lawyer man. This does seem like a good mission for a lawyer, doesn't it?
One call, that's all.
I don't think
Rachel Affleck.
Tafka's one of those guys.
No. Rachel Affleck, how about with VAR and slash offside, they do not use the lines. VAR can only review at full speed twice. If you're not sure, use the clear and obvious standard. That fixes glaring errors.
But this is my question with it. The technology is there. People keep wanting to spread this thing about the lines are being drawn by people and there's no basis for reality in them and they're just wrong. The lines, that actual system was created so TV didn't draw lines and mislead people. The Hawkeye system and that whole like crosshair thing, and I mean they went and measured the crown on different fields and the pitch of the pitch and all this stuff. So their cameras were 100%, 99 point whatever percent accurate, because of course nothing is 100% perfect.
Yeah.
But do we want to ignore more information? I don't get the logic behind it. The only thing that leads me to that is the time it takes to do it. I don't think we want to ignore information to get calls wrong. I don't follow that logic. But is there a limit to how long we want to take to get these calls as right as they can be? And I think most would agree that there is an issue with how long it takes.
Yeah, and I think that for me, experience with the technology should help with that.
I would hope.
And B, using the pitch side monitor as an aid in the process should also help in that time as well, instead of deferring to
That's different. No, it's a different conversation.
And all that.
That's a different conversation. You're not using the pitch side monitor for offside. So in terms of offside, pitch side monitor has nothing to do with it, because the referee didn't run over to look at the assistant referee's vantage point before VAR. You know, they trusted the flag, right?
Yeah.
Or they very rarely didn't trust the flag and didn't call it, because the flag doesn't call it, the whistle does. So the referee doesn't have to go look at the monitor for an offside, a simple offside decision. If there's an interpretation about deflections or player being active, then that's yes, they need to go look at it, because then that gets to interpretation. And that's a difficult thing to remember what your interpretation was on the fly when you weren't sure if it was offside to begin with. Go look. That one's okay. The pitch side monitor, it does add a little more time to it, but it's going to give you a greater degree of accuracy. And I want the calls to be right. That's my number one thing. I think the argument about the celebration stuff, you know, is it a perfect situation? No. But do we want bad goals to stand because we want somebody to celebrate?
Right.
Think back to bad goals that were allowed to stand against your team.
Mm-hmm.
England fans, 1986, hand of God. Do you want that to stand? United States fans, 2002, Torsten Frings. Do you wish you had VAR in that situation? And the referee could go take a look and get a better vantage point than maybe he had and get the call right? I think we want the calls to be right. The time limit and the number of replays, I don't know how to properly define it. I think the time limit you can set, and you'd want it generally to be on the longer side of what's reasonable. The number of replays, I don't want to limit that. I'd rather limit it by time than by number of replays, because let's say you can only look at it twice. You can only look at two different looks, since that's what our friend from IFAB has kind of come back to it a couple times. You can only have 2 looks or 3 looks or whatever number you set. What if your VAR producer doesn't get the right look until the 4th look or the 5th look? doesn't get that clear angle, doesn't give you the best look at it until then. Do we want to get the call wrong because we didn't want to look for 10 more seconds? It's tough. That's why there's not clear-cut answers about this stuff, because we're redefining the way the game is refereed. That's why I think the laws of the game need to be updated to reflect that. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's a difficult situation all the way around. I wouldn't set, I think some have tried to say like 15 seconds or 30 seconds. That's not enough. I would probably set it at 120 seconds, at 2 minutes. Because I think most VAR situations are handled by then. And the ones that haven't been handled by then are less clear and obvious. Not that you're looking, just that it's harder to tell. I disagree that referees are looking for something to call. I think that's unfair. I think that's completely unfair to referees.
And your phraseology was where I was going with it, is that you're looking, it's almost like you're looking too hard, and it's something that you're trying to chase after.
See,
if you couldn't find it the first couple of times.
That's fair. I think for a referee, they want to get it right. That's the number one thing. And if they're not sure, but there's information there, they want to take a look at all the information. And they want to make sure they got the call right. But then that gets to, is that clear and obvious? So then I think if you want to tie clear and obvious to a time limit, and if it's 2 minutes, if it's 3 minutes, whatever the number is, to where the majority of calls are made within that time, and if it hasn't been made, it's probably not clear and obvious, and the decision on the field should stand. But then you get back to the situation with delaying flags. Because then you didn't make a decision on the field, did you? Because you allowed the play to play out. Now, the AR is going to put the flag up at the end, but do you want to go back to where they blow the play dead, but they get it wrong? No, I don't think we want to do that. So you want to keep delaying the flag. Do you want that AR to not put the flag up or down, but to stand their position and wait until VAR gives them the information to put their flag up or signal goal? I don't know. I don't know what makes it better for the people in the building. I don't know what makes it better for broadcasters. I don't know what makes it feel better there. But
and the other wild card.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other wild card in all of this is not every television situation is the same. You do not have camera uniformity. You don't have the same number of looks at every match. It's not. You're not going to have 12 cameras at every game. Some cameras, some games you're only going to have 5 or 6, and you're going to have to deal with what you have. So that's another wild card to put in all of this analysis, is that, yes, you're looking to make it right, but at the same time, you're not going to have the looks that the match next to you is going to have because there's more TV cameras there.
No. That does factor in. I mean, I think the Premier League is probably on the high end of cameras available along with the Champions League. But how much consternation do you get out of VAR in the Champions League versus what you get out of the Premier League? Feels like two different worlds, doesn't it?
Yep.
And that's down to the implementation. I think the Premier League's implementation is a bigger issue. I think offside is the biggest issue with all of it, and it's the law more than anything else that needs clear-cut definition. On the VAR side, I'm leaning more and more and more I'm leaning more and more to some kind of time limit, but I would want it to be longer than you probably think it should, just to make sure that every call that can be gotten right.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes is the one that I'm kind of feeling like. So I think most are done well before that, but that does put a cap on some of these that get down to minutia. But then how do you settle it? Do you just go on the gut feeling of the AR that is using their eye to call it? Or do you say that if we can't tell it's offside, then it's on? And that's where I'm leaning. It's not about the call standing on the field in those situations because the AR doesn't have the information that you've taken 3 minutes to get. I think if you can't, and I think this goes back to even is on, right? This goes back to 1990.
Proving the negative. Yeah.
The AR can put their flag up or whatever. You take a look. If you can't say they're off in 3 minutes, then they're on.
Yep.
Maybe that's the new even is on. I don't know. Maybe we came to a resolution today. Probably not. Something will happen this weekend in the Premier League or FA Cup. Does the FA Cup use VAR? They don't?
Ooh, I don't think so.
I think they do.
Efforting.
Well, then something will happen that people wish they had used VAR because that goal that Sadio Mane was called back on would not be allowed to be fixed, and then everybody would be rioting about it. So wherever in the world games are played this weekend, there will be VAR situations, and people will be angry. Will they be angry for the right reasons? We'll have to wait and see.
Only Premier League grounds are currently licensed to use the VAR technology in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds of this season's FA Cup. However, every match from the quarterfinal stage onward will be licensed to use it. Good Lord.
Oh, it's just
VAR will be used
funny.
in 13 FA Cup 3rd round ties.
Okay, so it's used in some, but not in all. Oh, this is good.
I believe we will have...
This is really good.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
No, this is actually the proper one.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
No,
there you go.
Some of them don't.
No, they don't.
So they don't get to use VAR. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
You have to deal with bad calls when they happen. Don't get too angry.
Goodness gracious. Let's see. So, yep. We have 8 matches on Saturday, 4 on Sunday, 1 on Monday that will be using VAR. And the FA did confirm this, by the way, that in those 13 locations you will have VAR.
Okay, well, good for them. The rest will have to suffer. And
yeah,
I can guarantee you that there will be a FA Cup situation in a venue that doesn't have VAR that wishes it had VAR.
Oh,
Somebody will be very angry about not having VAR.
You ain't kidding. Oh, goodness gracious. Hang on here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 20, 23, 27, 30. Yeah, we're in the round of 64. So 13 will and 19 will not.
Have fun, guys.
Yeah. Woof.
That's going to do it for our week. We will have some crumpets and espresso later this afternoon for you guys to preview FA Cup, to preview La Liga, to preview all kinds of things. Preview the transfer window more than anything. It's probably what we'll be talking about a lot with some crumpets, some espresso, some... what else do we have in the mix? There'll probably be some haggis or some iron brew from Jarrett. Who knows? It'll be a busy soccer over there weekend preview. That'll post early in the evening. We'll be back on Monday with our usual time slot and a full week of soccer down here. If you really like the new time slot that we stumbled into today, let us know. Be an extra hour for John to drink Mountain Dew. Might be effective.
Yeah, well, sometimes.
Maybe.
Quick note from North Carolina FC. Alex Tambakis is returning for 2020.
Tambakis really found a good home in Cary. That's been a good fit for him after leaving Atlanta United. He's been one of the best goalkeepers in USL Championship. Expecting to have, I think, home openers in USL Championship announced on Monday. That's from Neil Morris in Raleigh.
Yep.
And WRAL. And if he is correct, then the full schedule should be posted by the end of next week. So then everybody will be up and running in terms of schedules. You can plan out your trips. You can plan out your times to go see the twos. You can plan out your times to go maybe see the twos on the road. And you start to figure out what this whole schedule will look like in 2020. We'll take a weekend to figure out what our schedule looks like, but we'll be back on Monday. Probably 9 o'clock.
Probably.
More than likely. It's very possible. But
Maybe.
if things happen, we'll be there at 10 or 11 or noon or whenever. Or you can listen on demand.
Yes. Send your questions even when you're not listening live. Let us know what you're thinking all weekend long, and we'll bring it back to you on Monday.
Yes. Let us know if you like our resolution of clear and obvious in the VAR world. Or maybe Tofka will come up with it and submit it to IFAB, and then we'll be famous. Or Tofka will, anyway. We'll see what happens. But we're gone. Mucha plata, y'all.
Much play.